have some time to do some sewing. It is 15 past 12 in the morning. I'm going to be making a bucket hat slash sun hat for my daughter. She is 3 months and I want her to have some cool hats. I wear a lot of hats myself and I would love for her to have lots of hats too. I created this pattern weeks ago. I tested this out already on a red hat and I did not like how it turned out because I decided that it would be a smart idea to use satin on the inside, and it was not a smart idea because the way how satin is, it's like it doesn't behave like other fabrics. So if you're putting it with other fabrics, you have to be very careful. You either have to cut the satin much bigger or probably put interfacing in it. But I did not do that. So after putting in the satin lining, it pretty much just went downhill. So this time I'm going to try it with denim, and I'm going to be using this pair of shorts that actually used to be her dad's. They're not really anymore because he donated it to the cause of making things. It has a huge rip right here, so obviously it can't be worn anymore. So I'm going to be putting it to very good use, and I'm going to show you guys how I do that. I'm going to be using this razor to get the pockets off of the pants. I'm doing that so that I can get the most out of this. Once I pull out this top part right here, I'm able to just rip it like that, which is very satisfying. I have so many jeans that I want to use to do these kind of things, and it works out perfectly for sustainability and reusing and recycling because, you know, of course a lot of clothes end up in the landfill, and that's not good for the environment because clothes do not break down. So I'm a big advocate of reusing things. So instead of throwing these pants away, we're just gonna make a hat out of it, which is very cool. Then she can have her father as a part of her. So what I'm most likely gonna do here is I'm gonna put this pattern piece right here, and then I'll be able to fit the other pieces around it like this. So I'm thinking about getting really cutesy and adding some bear ears to this hat. I'm not really quite sure how exactly I'm going to add them yet, but I'm going to trace them out on one of these pieces of denim fabric and cut them, and then you guys can see how it all comes together. I got 2 pieces for the crown, 2 pieces for the sides of the hat. They're actually pinned together right now. And then I have 2 pieces for the brim of the hat. But this is going to be the exterior. And since I'm pretty much done with all the viable fabric that I have out of these shorts, I'm going to have to use some different fabric for the inside of the hat in terms of the brim. So I'm going to see what I get from the fabric stash there, and then I'll show it to you. This is something that you justify. The bruises to prove. I found a pair of jeans, but they're so tightly tucked in here. These are another pair of jeans that were donated to the cause of making things. I don't know, I just like to smell things. By the way, if you want to get this pattern for yourself, you could join my Patreon to get lots of other patterns along with it. At this point, I have 4 pieces for the brim, 4 pieces for the sides, and 2 pieces for the crown of the hat. Like I said, I want to do some cute little bear ears. We have a nickname for her and it's Lou Bear, and I just feel like this would be a perfect fit. Let me grab a pen, and I'm going to fold my fabric like this, draw a straight line, and then from that straight line, I'm gonna come with a little curve like this. And I'm going to cut along this line that I just drew. This might actually be too big, so I might have to downsize it, but here's what it looks like. I think I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller than this, or skinnier, I should say. All right, so I find this step to be very helpful. It is matching the two seams that I just stitched and then putting a notch at the top and the bottom here so that it's like this, with the seams being open flat like this. I'm going to stitch here and here. I'm going to match those 4 notches to the 4 points on the top of the side. So that would be this seam, and the notch here and here. This is really just to test and make sure that the 2 pieces are the same length and that everything is gonna match up. If you find that your fabric is even slightly bigger on this part, then you can kind of stretch it so that it will ease its way in. So while you're stitching your fabric around the crown of your hat, you might notice that you end up with a few ripples that won't smooth out. In that case, you can pinch one of the notches and just stitch away the excess fabric. I'm just gonna stitch away 1/4 of an inch right now. And I'm gonna check to make sure that it matches better this time. It's a lot better now. Before I move on, I'm gonna have to top stitch this. So this is what I have so far, and it's looking so neat. I like it a lot. To make it even neater, not only am I going to pick this thread out because I have OCD, but I'm also going to go back on the inside and I'm gonna turn the allowance towards the crown of the hat and then give it a top stitch from this side. Looks so good. Funny story, I forgot to press record and I was stitching the cute bear ears without noticing that. But it's pretty simple. All you gotta do is just put these 2 pieces right sides together and then stitch around it like this, turn it the other way around, and then press and top stitch. The next thing I'm gonna do is to add my white interior pieces to it like this, and then I'm gonna stitch from one side to the next. I could always use this same blue thread that I've been using on the entire hat, but I feel like it just makes a lot more sense to just use white, especially since my intention is not necessarily to create like a stitch detail kind of vibes, even though nothing would really wrong with that still. And one of my favorite things about the Singer heavy duty sewing machine is the fact that it has a built-in needle threader. So if you're not good at threading your sewing machine needle, this will come in very handy. I'm using the Singer 4423, and if you've been thinking about getting yourself a sewing machine, then you can go on singer.com and use my code QUAINT10 to get a 10% discount. So since I'm using leatherette, which is also called faux leather, I'm going to have to grease it using this sponge and some baby oil. These are so cute, and I'm still trying to figure out how exactly I'm going to get it to go on it. I'm thinking of stitching it onto the bottom layer of the inside, and then on the top layer I would just cut some slits into it so that the airs can push through and stay upright. To do that, I'm going to fold this in half again so that the notches match each other, and then I'm gonna just do a little thing like this, kind of like crease right here, so. And then I'm gonna go like this for crease right here, so again, so that way I have like a nice cross in the center here. And I'm gonna put this one here and put this one here so that they're equal distances apart. I'm going to stitch it down really good. Isn't this just the cutest? Am I gonna like it when it's done? I have no clue, but I guess we'll find out. It's the following day, and these are the two pieces that I have ready so far. It's the inside and the outside of the top part of the hat. So the next thing I have to do is to work on the brim. I stitched this one already so I'd be able to check the size and make sure that it would fit around this piece. To do that, you're going to take your two brim pieces and put them right sides together like this. And sew along the sides with a 1/2 inch allowance. The next step is to top stitch the allowance on both sides of the brim of the hat. But before you do that, you want to check to make sure that it will be able to fit around this part of the hat. So in order to do that, you will just make sure that your notches or your seams are matching each other and it's pretty much flat like this. Then you're going to turn this back the way that it was before, and you're going to take this part where the stitches are and you're going to line it up with the edge of the hat. And then you're just going to keep on moving that along the fabric to see if when you're done, you will end up with two pieces that are pretty much the same. And obviously they're not the same. So all of this is excess fabric, because this is where the hat stops. I'm gonna just measure this to see how much excess that is. And it's pretty much 1.5. If you're going to be using my pattern to make this bucket hat, chances are I will have made tweaks on it before you even get it. So you might not have to take off as much as I'm taking off in this video. However, if you happen to make your own bucket hat pattern, or you still end up with some excess from using my bucket hat pattern, then this is a strategy that you can use. So I already confirmed that this is about 1.5 inches extra on the brim of my hat. I'm gonna take my brim and fold it in half like this. And because we know that half of 1.5 is 3/4, I'm going to just measure 3/4 of an inch from both sides, and I will know that this is where my stitch would fall. Using my ruler, following the original stitch line that was there, I'm going to draw a line. This is the new line that I'm going to be stitching on. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Just flip it over like this. I'm going to draw a line 3/4 of an inch away from the original stitch. So before stitching, I'm just going to match it up again to just make sure that it will work this time. Precision is everything when it comes to stitching this. So I'm going to start with the hat at the front instead. So you'll start right there at the pen mark, and then you'll just bring the hat along the fabric, and it should come to this other pen mark, which it does. So now it's safe for me to actually sew along these two lines. Don't you just hate it when your bobbin finishes in the middle of a sewing project? Just in case you weren't aware, this piece right here prevents your thread from slipping away when you're sewing or filling your bobbin. Okay. Now I can carry on with what I was doing. So I'm going to trim away the excess fabric that is beyond the new line that I just stitched. I'm going to trim just enough so that I can have allowance to stitch on top of. Just like this. And I'm going to open these two pieces to the sides so that the seam is open flat. And I'm going to top stitch along the two sides here. Lovely. So now we have this circular piece, and it's not really a perfect circle, but I'm going to take the other piece that I stitched just like it, and I'm going to put it right sides together with it, making sure that my seams are touching each other. I'm also going to pin my seams. So then I can do what I consider to be the most fun part, which is stitching around the outside edge of the hat. I stitch with a 1/4 inch allowance, and the next step is going to be to turn it inside out. But before I do that, I'm going to clip into the outer edges of my fabric just a bit, because I want to make sure that I'll be able to turn this out and get perfectly rounded edges. Now I can turn this to the next side. Voila! It's looking real cute so far. It's very important that I press my hat before. That will make it look a whole lot neater. Now this is looking a whole lot better, except my baby's crying. And that means I'll probably have to take a break soon, especially since it's about to be her bath time. Next, I'm going to stitch around this part of the hat to just close it, and then I'm going to do a series of stitches going around the brim just like you see in the usual bucket hat. A good practice that I like to follow is to stitch a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the hat first. And then I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from this stitch, and then the same for the stitch after that until I've filled this space with stitches. I was excited before, but now I'm starting to feel even more excited because look at the brim of my hat. I went ahead and pinned the brim of my hat to the crown of my hat just to see how it would look, but I'm gonna remove these pins and show you guys exactly how I go about doing this. I took the brim of my hat and I folded it so that these two seams would touch each other like this, and then at both sides I put a notch. So now I have 4 points around this part of the brim of my hat, that being 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to take the right side of this and I'm going to put it right sides together with the crown of my hat. Now I happen to have 3 seams on here because I had to stitch off some extra fabric right here. So I'm going to make this the back of the hat, which means that I would have to take the front of this and put it towards the front of this hat. So this would be the front. And remember, there are also 4 points on the brim of this hat as well. So we have these 2 seams, and then on both sides of that seam, we have a notch. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to just identify which part I want to be the front. I want this part to be the front. It's a little bit darker in shade. So I'm going to put this over my hat and I'm going to match the notch there to the notch that's on the hat and pin it in place. And then I'm gonna take these two seams and match them together. Then I'm gonna match the notches and match these seams. I'm going to stitch these two together. You might have to ease in your fabric at some of these points. All you'll do is to just slightly stretch your fabric so that they meet each other. I am loving this hat so much. I could of course leave it here, but I'm still gonna be adding these ears to make it super cute for my daughter. In order to do that, as you can see, I have my ears on the wrong side of the fabric, and that's because I want them to push through to the other side of the hat. So before I even move on, I'm going to make sure that I draw a line going across here. So using my razor, I'm going to gently slit the fabric, but I'm not gonna go past that mark that I made. Now it has the two holes for the ears to come through, and this kind of looks like a face, doesn't it? For the next step, I'm going to put this inside here. In order to do that, I am going to match all the same points that are on this to the points that are on this. So I'm gonna go like this. I'm using this seam as a reference to match with this seam. I'm gonna pin that. I'm gonna pin these ones. Then I'm going to pin these ones. So another method would be to just put the lining part inside and then stitch the raw edges using bias tape. This can also be challenging to turn out because the brim of it is very thick, but I still prefer this method. So when I'm stitching, I'm gonna stitch on top of this line. Coming closer to this point, I want to be mindful of the fact that I have to leave a space. That space is going to make it possible for me to turn the hat inside out. I don't want this space to be too small, because if it's too small, then turning the hat inside out will be kind of tricky. This is how big my space is. And I made it this big on purpose because of the fact that I'm using denim fabric. I'm gonna now turn it inside out. And if you're making this with ears like me, your ears should be on this side. Isn't that cute? This is how the hat is looking. So the inside will pretty much be finished just as beautifully as the outside. The next thing I want to do is to pull my ears through. Another alternative would probably have to be to cut the circle in half and add a 1/2 inch allowance, stitch the ears in between that space. But I like this option a lot, because it's something that you can do at the very last minute just in case you forget. This is really cute. To make it even cuter with a proper finish, I'm gonna top stitch this area, but first I wanna make sure that the fabric is folded in properly, the same portion as the allowance that I stitched with, which is about a 1/2 inch allowance. And to complete the hat, I'm going to stitch around this part right here. I'm gonna take this part of my sewing machine off. This is one of my favorite things about the Singer 4423. You can take this off and end up with a spot like this where you can easily put things over. So this is ideal for sewing sleeves, cuffs, and the legs of pants. I'm making sure that my seam is properly flattened before I start sewing. Get into it. I am loving how this looks. Just like that, I created a bucket hat. This could easily look like frog eyes. One of the things I really love about this is the fact that if I don't want these ears to be showing, I can actually put them back into the top of the hat, and then it's gonna be like this. Of course, the top is gonna be cut, and perhaps I need to figure out a better way to do this part. I still like it nonetheless because it's gonna give like a distressed vibe. And I just realized that these should have actually been a lot rounder if I wanted them to look like bear ears. I wouldn't be me if I didn't add an extra detail to this hat. So I went ahead and hand stitched a heart onto a patch of denim fabric. I cut that into a square and then I put it onto the front of the hat, and I think it's the cutest thing ever. I'm getting into my embroidery bag. If you embroider, I want you to comment down below. I love this heart. And if you watched all the way to the end, I want you to comment how you feel about the hat that I made for my daughter. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with a sewing friend.